Hi, welcome back. This is your favorite faceless masked commentator. I cover news and give my personal thoughts on issues. If you find my commentary interesting, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment. Today we're diving into a major new push from the Trump administration to finally crack down on massive healthcare and welfare fraud that's been draining billions from American taxpayers. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is rolling out a whistleblower reward program that could turn regular people into millionaires for tipping off the government about these scams, especially after a huge scandal blew up in Minnesota involving Somali immigrants ripping off programs meant for needy kids and families. This isn't just about one state anymore. Vice President J.D. Vance has already put numbers on how bad things got in Minneapolis, and he's openly hinting that California could be the next big target. So let's start with what kicked all this into high gear. Back in Minnesota, federal investigators uncovered schemes where scammers, mostly Somali immigrants, set up fake autism clinics, phony food distribution sites, and ghost housing services using straw owners to funnel taxpayer cash overseas. One estimate puts the total ripped off from government welfare programs in the state at least $9 billion since 2018. A big chunk of that came through a group called Feeding Our Future, which bilked $250 million from funds meant to feed hungry kids during the COVID era. Prosecutors charged 78 people in that case alone, and the money went to luxury cars, designer handbags, overseas properties, and allegedly even to Islamist terror networks like Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Scammers stole patient IDs through bribes and identity theft, flooded the system with bogus claims for treatments that never happened, and washed the proceeds through wire transfers, crypto, or straight-up luxury spending. The tactics were pretty sophisticated. They'd use stolen identities of retired doctors or immigrants as straw owners to create shell companies billing Medicare and Medicaid for wheelchairs, home health care, lab tests, drugs, or adult daycare that didn't exist. Sometimes they'd upcode procedures, pay kickbacks to complicit medical professionals, or recruit foreign nationals to submit fake claims. Once the government direct deposited the money, it got wired overseas fast, making recovery tough. Medicare and Medicaid fraud overall tops an estimated $70 billion a year, with one 2022 study from Colorado State University Global White-Collar Crime Task Force putting the annual cost at $68.7 billion. Last year, the Justice Department charged 324 defendants in a $10 billion healthcare fraud scheme, and transnational groups pulled $941 million from supplemental insurers. Reminder that this is your tax money we're talking about here. If you aren't pissed yet, you should be. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, the 63-year-old former hedge fund guy, didn't waste time once he took office. In January 2026, he visited Minnesota and started pushing hard. On January 9th, he held a virtual news conference and straight up said Governor Tim Walz had been negligent in his fiduciary duties, letting this happen on his watch. Bessent told reporters, "If you're sending money back to Somalia, then you're getting too much. Or you're part of the scam, and we're going to track you down." His team at the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, notified 4 money transfer firms. They were under investigation for alleged fraud tied to these social benefits abuses. They also issued a geographic order ramping up scrutiny on banks and money transmitters in Hennepin and Ramsey counties around Minneapolis and St. Paul. Now, any transfers over $3,000 heading outside the U.S. need extra FinCEN reports. The IRS Civil Enforcement Division is auditing some banks for possible money laundering, and they're forming a task force to look at nonprofits that handled pandemic-era tax incentives. Bessent made it clear the goal is stopping federal aid from being remitted overseas while protecting legitimate transfers. He said anyone who can prove the money didn't come from social service payments would be fine, and the investigation shouldn't chill honest remittances. But the message was loud. This fraud threatens the integrity of U.S. healthcare and financial systems, wastes resources for actual beneficiaries, and jacks up costs for everyone else. FinCEN even put out an 18-page advisory listing 24 red flags, like claims from people without U.S. permanent residence, sudden billing spikes from brand-new medical companies, or huge overseas transfers right after government deposits. Banks and firms that ignore it risk their own penalties. Just look at that New York investment bank Canaccord Genuity that got hit with an $80 million civil fine recently for failing to file suspicious activity reports. President Trump signed an executive order back in March 2025 calling for zero tolerance on this stuff across government, which naturally paved the way for more action. Vice President J.D. Vance kicked off an interagency task force at the Department of Justice focused on fraud, and he's leading another one through a new executive order. In a recent appearance, Vance dropped a bombshell, revealing that fraud uncovered in the Minneapolis area has probably totaled at least $19 billion since the administration started digging into the Twin Cities. He said taxpayer dollars meant for needy people never reached them because fraudsters were pocketing the cash instead. And he didn't stop there. Vance hinted California is next, saying, "We know there's a lot of fraud in California, and we're trying to get to the bottom of exactly what it looks like." President Trump himself announced in January that the California fraud investigation had begun and called the state more corrupt than Minnesota. Governor Gavin Newsom pushed back hard in February, claiming his franchise tax board has blocked over $125 billion in fraud since he took office, arrested criminals, and that these are mostly federal programs anyway. But the administration is moving forward with a national look at how Americans have been defrauded for years. Now here's where it gets really interesting for everyday people. On Monday, March 30th, 2026, Bessent launched a new whistleblower reward program under the Treasury Department that mirrors the IRS setup, but expands it. If you provide specific, timely, and credible information that leads to successful enforcement actions with monetary penalties over $1 million, you could get between 10 and 30% of the fines collected paid straight from those fines, not from regular taxpayer money. The existing IRS whistleblower office already works this way under Internal Revenue Code Section 7623. You submit solid info about tax underpayments or violations the IRS enforces, including healthcare fraud schemes that tie into taxes or reporting rules. For bigger cases where collected proceeds top $2 million, awards generally run 15 to 30% of what's recovered in taxes, penalties, interest, and related amounts. The office keeps things confidential under strict rules, refers tips for audits or investigations, and pays out fairly once collections happen, though awards can face sequestration adjustments like the one for fiscal year 2026. This program covers everything from Medicare and Medicaid scams to broader financial crimes. Bessent's push includes the FinCEN advisory warning about healthcare fraud spiking since COVID, and the Trump administration has already brought nearly 200 healthcare fraud cases across 50 federal districts. One big takedown called Operation Gold Rush nailed a Russian-backed syndicate that bought legit medical supply companies to file fake durable medical equipment claims and steal identities. The point is, with $70 billion a year vanishing, the government needs eyes and ears everywhere, and now they're willing to pay big for them. On a personal note, I think this whistleblower push is a very smart move. Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, and Tim Walz responded so poorly to the fraud claims that they basically confirmed massive fraud nationwide, if that was bad. And we're already getting big signs that California is 10 times worse. It's clear that this fraud ring is simply too big for the current administration or any previous one to handle by themselves. It'd be so hilarious if this turned into a legit side gig for younger Americans. Imagine a crazed Reddit moderator spending their time doing this instead of crawling forums all day. They'll actually become a net positive for the country. If you're interested in contributing, head over to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network website or fincen.gov/whistleblower. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more straight talk on the stories that matter, Make sure to subscribe, smash that like button, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.